Gentleman yields. I now recognize Mr. Menendez for his 5 minutes questioning, the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you to all the witnesses for appearing here today. I know it's been a long hearing, but specifically I want to thank Ms. Snodgrass for your advocacy, for your testimony here today, and for what you're doing to try to raise awareness around fentanyl. Coming from all the way from Alaska means a lot to us. My son's name is Robert, too. He turned 1 yesterday. A lot of the work that I do here is thinking about my children and the children of our neighbors, grandchildren of our neighbors, and ensuring that future grandparents and parents don't have to do the advocacy that you're doing today. The issue of fentanyl and its impact on our country is something that I believe we all take seriously. You mentioned legislation that's been introduced in your son's name. It's introduced by a Democrat and has both bipartisan support. I believe that we should be focused on solutions. You present 5 items in your testimony. Some of it's funding non-invasive screening, both for DHS and our Postal Service. Those are concrete solutions that we can work on here in Congress. I think where folks on this side get a little bit frustrated is that we're not talking more about those tangible solutions to ending the scourge of fentanyl in this country. We have a tendency in this environment here in Washington to politicize a lot of what we do. And some of what we do is constructive. Some of it is what we do is working with people like you to figure out solutions so we can prevent the loss of life in this country, as opposed to purely trying to assign blame. So I thank you for coming here and trying to recenter what we're doing, because it is important work and it is within our jurisdiction. And I do look forward to continuing to do the work, to continue to look forward towards those solutions that you presented so we can expand upon them. But there's also things that this administration has done, like Operation Blue Lotus, which seized thousands of pounds of fentanyl, thousands of pounds of precursors, arrested over 200 individuals engaged in the transportation of fentanyl and other illicit drugs. We should be thinking about how we can grow that program, as opposed to just trying to ignore it because it's something that the administration has done in a productive way to address the challenge of fentanyl that we have. And I hope to do that work, and to do that work with all of my colleagues in this room on both sides of the aisle, because it's been said before, it's not a Democratic issue, it's not a Republican issue, it's an American issue. And we start addressing the issue as Americans, as opposed to Republicans and Democrats, we'll get to much better solutions. So I thank you again for your advocacy and for your time here. I just want to quickly turn to some of the things that we have dealt with in this committee, and that includes H.R. 2, the border bill that we had through our committee earlier this year. We offered a series of amendments that we thought could improve the bill, even though we thought in its whole it was flawed. But specifically, the amendments that we introduced, myself included, had to deal with the treatment of NGOs. H.R. 2 would prevent DHS from providing any funding to non-governmental entities, including faith-based nonprofit organizations, who provide shelter, transportation, and legal assistance to families fleeing horrific conditions. It would also require FEMA's disaster management partners, such as Catholic Charities, to verify every person's immigration status before providing life-saving services. Mr. Gallant, as someone who has spent a considerable amount of time with asylum seekers and others in the immigration court system, how do these types of services and the nonprofits who provide them impact those who seek assistance?
I think having the NGOs and nonprofits involved is absolutely critical. That partnership, that public-private partnership, is essential to doing the work on the ground. I think that the nonprofits can do things that the government can't do. There's a certain trust factor. They are on the ground working every day with these communities. So the more we can foster that, the better.
And they can be more nimble, right? Because they can move in terms of how the circumstances change to better adapt to what's happening on the ground. Would you agree with that?
I would.
Let me ask you, in your opinion, should Congress be restricting the amount of funding that goes towards these nonprofits?
No.
And what do you think the impact on migrants, and you alluded to this, the communities that they serve look like should this funding be restricted?
I'm sorry?
What would the impact on migrants and communities look like should this funding be restricted?
Yeah, I think it would help significantly. I think that's exactly what we need is nonprofits helping with housing, transportation, all those logistics. As you point out, they are nimble, they are working with the communities. I think the impact would be significant.
Thank you, and I yield back.